Ray Castillo had been driving Willie Nelson's tour bus for 11 years. He had taken wrong turns before, through the back streets of Memphis, through the fog-locked highways of Northern California, through the flooded 2 lanes of rural Louisiana. But the wrong turn he took off the 101 freeway on the morning of July 19, 2014, was the one he would talk about for the rest of his life. He had meant to stay on the freeway. He still does not know exactly why he didn't. The bus rolled slowly down 3rd Street in Santa Monica, crawling through mid-morning traffic. Willie was in the back, eyes closed, hat tilted forward, resting the way he always rested between cities. Not quite sleeping, not quite awake. The bus had been quiet for 40 minutes. Ray had the radio off. The engine was the only sound. Then Ray heard something through the cracked driver's window. At first, he thought it was a recording, a speaker somewhere outside a shop, or a busker's amplifier picking up a track. He leaned slightly toward the open glass. The sound was acoustic, a guitar played without a pick, the strings struck with bare fingertips. And the melody? Ray recognized it before his brain had fully caught up with his ears. He had heard that melody 800 times in 11 years. He knew every rise and fall of it. On the sidewalk, no more than 30 feet from the bus window, a boy sat on an overturned milk crate. He looked no older than 13. He was barefoot. His jeans were cut off at the knee. The guitar in his hands was old enough that the lacquer had worn completely off the body, leaving the bare wood pale and raw in the July heat. Around the neck, just below the tuning pegs, a strip of black electrical tape held a crack in the wood together. The case at his feet was open, but there was no tip jar inside it, no handwritten sign asking for money, no Venmo handle on a piece of cardboard. There was only a single photograph, taped flat to the velvet lining, the edges soft from handling. The boy was playing Always on My Mind, not performing it, playing it. Eyes closed, chin down, fingers pressing each chord with an intensity that had nothing to do with the small crowd beginning to drift toward him, and everything to do with the photograph lying open in the case at his feet. In the back of the bus, Willie Nelson opened his eyes. He had not touched the radio, there was no speaker on, and yet his song, the song that had lived inside him since 1971, the one born from guilt and regret and the slow ruin of everything he had neglected while chasing fame, was coming through the walls of his bus like something that could not be stopped. He sat up, tilted his head, listened for 3 full seconds. Then he reached forward and put his hand on Ray's shoulder. "Stop the bus," Willie said. No one on that sidewalk had any idea who was sitting 30 feet away, listening through the wall of a tour bus. No one knew that the man about to step off that bus had written that song as a confession, a prayer sent too late to people he had already failed. And no one knew that the photograph taped inside that guitar case was the reason this boy had not spoken a single full sentence to another human being in 11 months. Before this story goes any further, if you've ever heard a song that felt like it was written for a moment only you were living through, hit subscribe right now, because what happened next on that Santa Monica sidewalk was exactly that kind of moment, and you need to see all of it. But to understand what happened on that sidewalk, you have to go back 11 months, to a hospital corridor in Bakersfield, California, and a phone call that a 13-year-old boy should never have been the one to answer. Daniel Reyes grew up in a 2-bedroom house on the east side of Bakersfield, the kind of neighborhood where the summers were brutal and the winters were forgotten before they arrived. His father, Carlos Reyes, was a farm worker, up before 4 every morning, boots on before the coffee finished brewing, driving his rusted 1998 Ford pickup through the Flat Valley darkness toward the packing facilities in Kern County. Carlos was not a man of many words. He didn't need to be. He had one tape, a worn, sun-warped cassette of Willie Nelson's greatest hits, that he played every single morning in that truck, volume low, window cracked, like a quiet conversation with the road. And his favorite song, the one he always rewound and played twice before he reached the facility gates, was Always on My Mind. Daniel had grown up hearing that song the way other children grow up hearing lullabies. He couldn't remember the first time he heard it. It had simply always been there. In the mornings, through the thin wall between his bedroom and the front door, drifting back into the house as his father's truck pulled out of the gravel driveway. When Daniel was 8 years old, he asked his father what the song was about. Carlos thought about it for a long moment, the way he thought about everything, slowly, seriously, like the question deserved its full weight. Then he said, "It's about loving someone right, but too late. So you sing it and hope they still hear you." Daniel didn't fully understand that answer then. He would understand it completely by the time he was 13. Carlos died on August 4th, 2013. An equipment malfunction at the Kern County packing facility. He was 41 years old. The phone rang at 6:17 in the morning, and Daniel, home alone while his mother Rosa worked her overnight laundry shift, picked it up. He was the one who had to call his mother. He was 12 years old. After that morning, something inside Daniel Reyes went very quiet. He stopped raising his hand in class. He stopped eating dinner at the table. He stopped answering when neighbors called his name from across the street. His teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, wrote in his file 3 weeks after Carlos died, "This child is grieving in a language no one around him speaks." The only thing Daniel kept doing, the only thing that seemed to require nothing from him that he wasn't able to give, was playing his father's guitar. Carlos had left behind almost nothing of material value, but in the closet, beneath 2 folded work shirts, was a 1970s Yamaha FG180. Its body cracked along the lower bout, its original strings long since replaced with whatever was available. He had only listened, for 12 years, to the way his father's song moved. The rises, the pauses, the places where the melody seemed to hold its breath. He taught himself by feel. And every Saturday morning, he carried that guitar to the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, where his aunt lived 2 blocks away, opened the case on the pavement, and played the only song that made the silence bearable. Not for money. The case was always half closed, the tip opening turned toward the ground. Inside it, taped flat against the velvet lining, was a photograph. Carlos Reyes in his work shirt, arm around a squinting, gap-toothed boy, both of them standing in front of that rusted Ford pickup, the Kern County sky enormous and white behind them. Daniel was not busking. He was talking to his father. And for 11 Saturdays in a row, nobody had truly stopped to listen. Until the Saturday that a tour bus took the wrong exit off the 101 freeway, and a man who had written that song as his own private confession found himself 30 feet away, listening through a cracked window. Willie Nelson had not planned to be in Santa Monica that morning. The tour had a noon call time in Burbank, a production meeting for a television appearance that his manager had scheduled 3 weeks earlier. The bus was supposed to be on the 101, moving northeast, not crawling south through surface streets toward the ocean. But Ray had missed the interchange, and Willie had not complained, because Willie almost never complained about the road. He had been on it for 60 years. He had made peace with every version of it. What he had not made peace with on that particular morning was something quieter and harder to name. 3 weeks earlier, Willie had sat in a recording studio in Austin and listened to a playback of Always on My Mind for a tribute project a producer friend had been assembling. He had heard that song thousands of times, had sung it in stadiums, on television stages, in small Texas dance halls at 2 in the morning. But sitting alone in that control room, listening to his own voice come back at him through the studio monitors, something had shifted. The song had been written in 1971, during the collapse of his second marriage, during the years when he was never home, never present, building a career on the foundation of every morning he had driven away and every person he had left standing in a doorway. He had written it as an apology that arrived after the damage was already permanent. And hearing it that morning in Austin, he felt the full weight of that. Not pride, not nostalgia, but the specific ache of a man who had loved people imperfectly and knew it. He was still carrying that when Ray stopped the bus on 3rd Street. Willie stood up slowly, the way a man of 81 moves when his body remembers every mile it has covered. He put on his worn black denim jacket. He adjusted his red bandana. He did not tell his tour manager, Mickey Raphael, where he was going. Mickey was on a phone call in the front cabin, and Willie simply moved past him, pushed open the bus door, and stepped down onto the Santa Monica pavement alone. The morning was already warm, the July air flat and bright off the ocean 2 blocks west. Willie stood on the sidewalk for a moment, orienting himself. He could hear the guitar clearly now, not through walls, not through glass, but open and direct, the notes rising clean above the street noise. He walked toward it. The small crowd that had gathered, 7 people, maybe 8, parted instinctively without knowing why. Willie moved through them slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, and stopped 6 feet behind the boy. Daniel still had his eyes closed. His chin was down, his jaw set with a concentration that Willie recognized immediately. Not as technique, not as performance, but as necessity. The boy was not playing because he wanted to. He was playing because he had no other choice. Willie stood there for a full 30 seconds without making a sound. Then he tilted his head slightly and looked down at the open guitar case. He saw the half-closed lid, he saw the absence of a tip jar, and then he saw the photograph. A man in a work shirt, a boy squinting into bright sky, a rusted truck, a horizon that went on forever. Willie's jaw tightened. He removed his hat and held it at his side. He had written "Always on my mind" for someone he had failed while they were still alive. This boy was playing it for someone he had already lost. The distance between those 2 griefs was not as large as Willie might once have believed. Standing on that sidewalk, hat in hand, 6 feet behind a silent barefoot child, he felt them converge into something that sat directly behind his sternum and did not move. A woman near the back of the small crowd recognized him first. She grabbed her companion's arm. Willie caught her eye and raised one finger to his lips. She pressed both hands over her mouth. 3 phones came out, slowly, carefully, as though the wrong movement might break something irreplaceable. Nobody made a sound. If this story is already getting to you, and something tells me it is, subscribe and hit the bell right now, because the moment that's coming in the next 60 seconds on that Santa Monica sidewalk, nobody who is there has ever forgotten it. You won't either. Willie Nelson began to sing. Not loudly, not with the full-throated authority of a man who had filled arenas for 6 decades. He began the way the song itself began, quietly, almost privately, his voice entering one full verse behind Daniel's guitar, low and unhurried, slipping beneath the melody like something that had always been there and was only now becoming audible. Daniel's fingers stopped. Not gradually, not with a fumbled chord. They simply froze, every finger locked against the strings, because Daniel's brain could not process what his ears were telling him and continue asking his hands to move at the same time. The guitar went silent. The street did not. Traffic moved 1 block north. A delivery truck idled at the corner. But in the small circle of sidewalk, where a barefoot boy sat on a milk crate with a taped-together Yamaha in his lap, there was a stillness that had no business existing on a Los Angeles street at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. Daniel turned around slowly. He looked up at the man standing behind him, the red bandana, the silver braids, the deep-lined face, and for 3 full seconds he did not move, did not breathe, did not blink. He was not starstruck. Starstruck is what happens when you see someone famous. What happened to Daniel Reyes was something entirely different. It was recognition. The specific, destabilizing recognition of hearing the voice that had narrated his entire childhood come out of a living human being standing 6 feet away on a Santa Monica sidewalk. Willie sat down on the pavement. Not on a bench, on the actual concrete, crossing his legs slowly, with the ease of a man who had decided he was exactly where he needed to be. Willie nodded at the guitar. "You mind if we finish it?" What came out of Daniel was not the abbreviated response of a boy who had spent 11 months rationing his words. It came out fully and without armor. "My dad used to say that song was a promise," Daniel said. "Not a song, a promise." Willie went completely still. The woman who had recognized him first later told a reporter she had watched Willie perform live 7 times across 4 decades. She said she had never seen his face do what it did in the 2 seconds after Daniel spoke those words. "Your dad teach you to play?" Willie asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. "He just taught me to listen." Willie took the Yamaha with both hands, ran his thumb along the taped crack in the neck, and played one chord. The note rang out over the sidewalk, rich and full, embarrassing every other sound on the street. "I wrote that song because I ran out of time to say what I meant. Well, it still could have made a difference," Willie said. "I was hoping the song would do what I couldn't." Daniel was quiet. Then, "My dad never heard me play it." The silence that followed lasted 4 full seconds. 53 people stood without moving. The traffic officer who had arrived 2 minutes earlier walked quietly back to his patrol car and turned off his lights. Willie reached into his jacket and removed a small, folded photograph from his wallet, edges worn soft, the crease white from decades of opening and closing. A young man in a work shirt, squinting into the sun. He held it beside the photograph in Daniel's guitar case. 2 men in work shirts, 2 different suns, 40 years apart. He folded his photograph carefully and returned it to his wallet. "He heard you," Willie said. "Trust me on that." Then he picked up Daniel's guitar, and this time, Daniel sang. If this story is doing something to you right now, subscribe and share it before the next section. Because what Willie put in motion in the 60 seconds that followed changed Daniel Reyes's life in ways neither of them could have predicted that morning. When the last note of "Always on My Mind" dissolved into the Santa Monica morning air, the crowd did not applaud immediately. They waited, the way people wait at the end of something that has no business ending, as though applause might be the wrong response, too small a gesture for what they had just witnessed. Then a woman in the back started it, and within 3 seconds every person on that sidewalk had their hands together, and 2 of them were crying openly, and nobody was embarrassed about it. Willie handed the Yamaha back to Daniel with both hands. Daniel held it against his chest. "You've been carrying that a long time," Willie said quietly. "Not the guitar." Both of them knew he did not mean the guitar. Daniel nodded. His jaw was tight. He was 13 years old, and he was working very hard not to come apart completely on a public sidewalk. And Willie could see that effort, and respected it enough not to say another word about it. Instead, Willie reached down to his belt and unclipped a worn bronze harmonica, small, dented along one corner, the finish rubbed away at the edges from years of handling. He set it on the velvet lining of Daniel's guitar case, beside the photograph of Carlos Reyes. Not on top of it, beside it, carefully. Every musician needs something to talk with when the guitar isn't enough. Then he stood and turned to his tour manager, Mickey Raphael, who had appeared at the edge of the crowd 3 minutes earlier and had stood there in silence, watching, understanding immediately that his job in this moment was to be invisible. Willie spoke to him quietly for 90 seconds. Mickey pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket and wrote without looking up. Nobody in the crowd heard what was said. Nobody tried to hear. There are moments that announce themselves as private, even when they happen in public. And every person on that sidewalk recognized this as one of them. It was at that moment that a woman came pushing through the back of the crowd, still wearing her pale blue laundry apron from the commercial laundry on 4th Street, where she had been working since 6 that morning. Rosa Reyes had received a phone call from her neighbor 40 seconds earlier. 3 words, "Turn on Instagram," and had walked the 2 blocks at a pace that was almost running without quite being running. She broke through the front of the crowd and stopped. Her son was sitting on a milk crate on a Santa Monica sidewalk, holding his father's guitar against his chest, with Willie Nelson standing 3 feet away, watching him, with an expression Rosa had never seen on another human face. Like recognition, like relief. Rosa put both hands over her mouth. A stranger beside her, a woman she had never met and would never see again, put an arm around her shoulders without a word. Daniel looked up and saw his mother. He did not say anything. He didn't need to. He just held the guitar a little tighter, and for the first time in 11 months, Rosa Reyes watched her son's face do something she had been afraid she might never see again. He smiled. What Willie had said to Mickey Raphael in those 90 seconds of quiet conversation beside the crowd became clear 4 days later, when a woman named Patricia Sosa received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. Patricia had spent 22 years teaching music to underprivileged children across Los Angeles. She had worked out of church basements and community centers, and once, for 8 months, out of the back of a converted school bus parked in East Compton. She had seen a great many talented children in those 22 years. But the name Willie Nelson gave her over the phone that Thursday morning, and the story he told her in under 4 minutes, made her sit down in the middle of her kitchen and not stand back up for a while. Within 2 weeks, Daniel Reyes had a full scholarship to the Los Angeles Music Academy's youth program. A refurbished Martin 000 to 15 million acoustic guitar waiting for him at Patricia's studio on Vermont Avenue. And his first formal lesson scheduled for a Saturday morning, the same day of the week he had been carrying his father's guitar to the promenade for 11 months. He brought the Yamaha to the first lesson anyway. Patricia never asked him to leave it at home. Rosa Reyes wrote Willie a letter by hand, 3 pages, in Spanish, on paper she bought specifically for the purpose. She mailed it to his Austin, Texas address. His assistant read it to him on the tour bus, somewhere outside Oklahoma City. Willie listened without speaking. When it was finished, he asked for the letter, folded it carefully, and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He never discussed it publicly. But Patricia Sosa later confirmed, without elaborating, that Daniel's tuition had been paid in full, anonymously, for 2 consecutive years. Daniel's former teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, received a voicemail 3 weeks after that Saturday on the promenade. A voice she recognized, but had not heard in 11 months. Full sentences, calm and clear. She saved it. She still plays it at the start of every school year for students who are struggling. Proof, she tells them, that silence is not permanent. 3 years after that July morning on 3rd Street, the 17-year-old named Daniel Reyes walked onto a stage at the Austin City Limits Music Festival as part of the Youth Showcase program. He was not the headliner. He had no album, no manager, no record deal. What he had was a 1970s Yamaha FG-180 with a cracked body and a strip of black electrical tape around the neck that he had been offered money to replace and had refused every time. He played Always on My Mind. The audience went quiet within the first 8 notes. On the back of that guitar, still visible in faded black ink along the lower bout, was a signature. Willie Nelson had put it there with a marker borrowed from Mickey Raphael's jacket pocket on a Santa Monica sidewalk on July 19, 2014, the same morning he had sat cross-legged on the pavement beside a barefoot boy who was playing a promise to a photograph. In a 2018 interview, Willie was asked to name the most meaningful musical moment of the previous decade. He did not mention a Grammy. He did not mention a stadium or a television stage or a collaboration with another legend. He described a boy on a sidewalk, a taped-together guitar, and a photograph in an open case. He said, "A song isn't finished when you write it. It's finished when someone else needs it." Today, Daniel Reyes teaches free weekend guitar lessons to the children of farm workers in East Los Angeles. On the wall, above the door of his small studio, hangs a single framed photograph, a grainy screenshot from a 2014 phone live stream. A barefoot boy on a milk crate. A silver-haired man sitting cross-legged on the pavement beside him. Both of them looking at a photograph inside an open guitar case. Beneath it, written in Daniel's own handwriting on a strip of white paper, "He heard you. Trust me on that." If this story reminded you that the right song finds the right person at exactly the right moment, share this video right now, because somewhere tonight there is a child playing to a photograph, and they deserve to be heard. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next story.